Welcome to The Explainer, where we're digging into a really fundamental question. How do we know we can actually trust the science we read about?
You've definitely seen this, right? You get these whiplash headlines where one week coffee is a miracle drink, and the next week it's terrible for you. It's enough to make you think that scientists just can't make up their minds. Well, the answer to that confusion, or at least a big part of it, comes down to this one powerful idea. It's called reproducibility, and it's basically the invisible bedrock that all of modern science is built on. And today, we're going to see exactly why it matters so much. So let's get right into it. What exactly do we mean when we talk about reproducible research? What is this cornerstone of scientific trust?
It's actually a pretty simple concept at its core. It just means, can someone else take your ingredients, that's your data, and follow your recipe, your computer code, and get the exact same result? It's not about whether they agree with your conclusions, it's just about proving that the numbers check out. It is the ultimate form of showing your work.
And believe it or not, this isn't some newfangled idea. Way back in 1995, a couple of researchers put it perfectly. They said a scientific paper by itself is just an ad for the research. The real scholarship, the actual science, is the whole package. The data, the code, everything you need to check it for yourselves.
Now, all this theory is fine, but the best way to see the true power of this idea is to see it in the real world. So we're going to dive into 3 incredible stories. One about an unexpected finding that sparked a huge fight, another about a hidden flaw that snuck into an entire field of research, and a final, pretty shocking story about a failure that could have put people's lives at risk. And what you're going to see is that in each of these stories, reproducibility plays a slightly different but totally critical role. It acts as a referee in a big public fight, it works like a magnifying glass to find tiny hidden problems, and it serves as a powerful detector for just plain bad science. All right, so let's start with our first case study. We're going back to the 1990s, when a groundbreaking study on air pollution kicked off a massive national debate. So researchers at Harvard published these 2 really important studies, and what they found was that air pollution, specifically tiny particles in the air, was linked to people dying earlier way more strongly than anyone had realized. I mean, this was a really big deal. And you can imagine what happened next. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, saw this and started thinking about making air quality rules much, much stricter. But with billions of dollars potentially on the line, industry groups fought back hard. They attacked the research, claimed the analysis was wrong, and suddenly the science itself was on trial.
So what do you do in a situation like that? How do you figure out who's right? Well, you call in a neutral referee. This group, called the Health Effects Institute, was hired to do a totally independent reanalysis. They got all the original data, all the notes, and they set out to reproduce the entire thing from scratch.
And here's where it gets interesting. The verdict? The investigation found that, yeah, the original researchers' data organization was a little sloppy, but it wasn't broken. And the most important part, they were able to reproduce the main results. The core scientific finding, that link between pollution and mortality, it held up. This whole episode led to this clever idea of a Schrödinger's analysis. Think about it. From the industry's perspective, the study was a failure because it was messy. But from the scientist's perspective, it was a success because the result was correct. In the middle of all that, reproducibility was the mediator. It confirmed the science was solid, which meant policy could move forward based on actual evidence.
Okay, on to our second story. This one is a little different. It's about what happens when a whole bunch of studies seem to agree with each other, but there's a single tiny flaw hiding underneath it all. So, in the early 2000s, there was this statistical method that became the absolute gold standard for air pollution research. And pretty much everyone in the field started using the exact same popular software to do their analysis. This created something called a software monoculture. Now, you don't have to be a math whiz to get this. The important thing is that the theory behind the model was totally solid. It made sense, and study after study using this software got results that seemed to line up. On the surface, everything looked perfect. But there was a problem. A teeny tiny bug buried deep in the software's default settings. It was so subtle, nobody noticed. And because everyone was using the same exact tool, this one little bug tainted hundreds of studies. It forced a massive, field-wide reanalysis of years of research. And that's the big lesson here. Reproducibility isn't just about catching a typo in someone's code. It's about stress testing the very tools we use to do science.
It shows that when an entire community puts all its eggs in one basket, a single tiny flaw can cause a huge systemic problem. It's a wild reminder of how powerful default settings can be. All right, our final story is, well, it's the most dramatic. This is where we see reproducibility in its most critical role, as the last line of defense, protecting actual patients from very real harm. So, a group of researchers published a series of huge papers in some of the world's top journals, and they made an absolutely revolutionary claim that they could use a person's genes to predict if chemotherapy would work for them. I mean, this would completely change how we treat cancer. But then, other scientists got the data and tried to reproduce the findings. And they couldn't. Not even close. Instead, the whole thing started to unravel. They found a cascade of horrifying errors. The data was misaligned by just one row, throwing everything off. The labels for patients who responded to chemo were literally switched with those who didn't. Data points were just copied and pasted. This went way beyond a simple mistake. The problems were so bad that an internal memo, which later came out, called for a complete emergency stop. It basically said that continuing this work could actually put patients in danger. This wasn't just about getting a paper retracted anymore. This was about protecting people from flawed science. So we've walked through a huge public fight, a hidden software bug, and a complete catastrophic failure. So what's the big takeaway from all this? Why is reproducibility so much more than just some boring academic box-checking exercise? Because it's not just about checking the math. It's really a cultural value. It's what builds a bridge of trust between people who disagree. It's the magnifying glass that finds flaws in the tools we all take for granted. And, as we just saw, it's the ultimate safeguard against both honest mistakes and even outright fraud. It's what allows science to find its own errors and ultimately to get better. When you boil it all down, reproducible research is really about one simple but incredibly powerful demand. Show me. Show me your data. Show me your code. Show me how you got there. It's that principle that lets science build on itself with confidence. And it kind of leaves us with a bigger question, doesn't it? In a world just overflowing with information, how do we apply that same show me principle to verify all the other things we choose to believe?